Great. So welcome from my side. Thanks for joining. I can see that there are a lot of people coming in, so I would suggest we wait a minute or two until everyone had a chance to find the Zoom link and grab a coffee or a glass of water and join us. I can see all my panelists. That's great. So also a big thank you from my side for being here and spending at least this sunny afternoon in Berlin with us. And I see the audience is going up, so it's more people joining. Let's wait a few more seconds until we start, because we have a really tight schedule. It's only 1 hour and we have a lot of really interesting topics, speakers, and questions. So let's make the most of it. And I still see that there are more people joining, but as this session will be recorded for everyone who's joining a little bit later, that's no problem at all, as you can all check out our discussion afterwards. So yeah, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and yeah, thanks for joining us today. My name is Kim and I'm Bitcom's Head of Corporate Affairs, and I'll be your host today. And it's really a pleasure to be the host of this session, as we are talking about two topics that are really close to, I guess, all our hearts. It's digitization and sustainability, and we will talk about how digital technologies can contribute to the ambitious climate goals and to climate neutrality. And we will also talk about concrete applications in the industry and the corporate perspective on sustainability. And for that, it's a pleasure to welcome Niklas Feldkamp. He's one of our Bitcom managing directors on the managing board, and he will join us for some welcoming remarks. So Niklas, thank you for being here. The stage is yours. You are still on mute?
Yes.
Great.
Sorry for that. Always the same. Kim, thanks a lot. And as you said, we have a tight schedule, so I'll keep it really short. But we're currently facing two deep transformations, as you said, climate change and digital transformation. And the crucial question, of course, is whether and how we can turn digital transformation into climate action. Bitcom has launched the study Climate Impact of Digitalization. And the study carried out by Accenture has shown that the digital technologies can contribute more than half of Germany's, to Germany meeting its climate targets by 2030. In concrete, that means a targeted and accelerated implementation of digital solutions, and this is crucial, can reduce CO2 emissions in Germany by 151 megatons within the next 10 years. But of course, as I said, we need a targeted and accelerated implementation of digital solutions. We'll hear more about this study by Alexander. He and his team, they really did a great job, and I think there's a lot we can discuss later. And of course, there's also the European Commission's report, the package published recently, the Fit for 55. So I think there are more than topics that we can not all discuss in 1 hour, but I think it's really important to come together to this topic. It's a great pleasure for me and for all of us that we have experts from all over Europe joining us today. And it's a great pleasure for us, Alexander, to have you here today with us and to get some insights from the study that I just mentioned with a few sentences, and you'll figure out the most important outcomes of this study. And I'll directly hand over to you, and looking forward to a great event today, to a great discussion. Thanks a lot for all of you being with us, spending this sunny afternoon with us.
Thank you very much, Niklas, and a warm welcome from me as well, from Southwest Berlin. And I'm looking to the sky, and I don't know about sunshine. Here it's rather cloudy to complement the weather forecasting, and you see even within one city the different weathers. Now, my name is Alexander Holst. I'm a partner at Accenture Strategy, and I'm leading the sustainability practice since 2008. And ever since, we have worked on the topic of how to integrate ecological and societal aspects into the core business of companies, into their decision making, which on the one hand sounds easy, but in truth, it's pretty damn difficult. And one way of accelerating the decarbonization or the integration of sustainability into core business processes decisions is digitization. And with that, we want to take a look at the study that Niklas just mentioned. And my colleague, Jona, would like to share the screen, which I hope that you can all see now. Now, within my short little speech, I would like to highlight basically 3 points. One is our study, then some deep dive on the digital footprint of certain aspects, and then just the closing of the contextualization of the German climate law, which is easily extendable to the European Fit for 55. Now, on the next page, you see where did we come from. We didn't start just last year on the topic of digitization and sustainability. Back in 2015, the Global E-Sustainability Initiative asked us, can you calculate the global footprint, the abatement potential of digitization on carbon? And I had the honor to present to Angela Merkel just 2 weeks ahead of COP21 these findings, and make sure that the message of 12 gigaton reduction globally where came across. Well, this was in a time where the numbers got higher and higher, right? This was about potential, calculation potential. 2016, we expanded it a little bit beyond carbon because the SDGs, the Sustainability Development Goals, were published, and we looked at them as well. 2018, we actually didn't just calculate lovely potential, so the carrot, so to speak. We even looked at, is there already a link between increasing digitization in the country and increasing the SDGs in that country? And the analysis of over 200 countries were very positive. Digitization improves the SDGs, in a very broad way. Now, this basis then was the foundation for the Bitkom study, which you will see on the next slide, which we had the honor to do last year and was published and presented by Bitkom on 1st of December during the digital summit of the German federal government that takes place every year. And this last year, it had the subject, the big motto, digitization and sustainability. Now, what was the study all about? We looked at 7 clusters. You see them on the left, the classical ones like manufacturing, mobility, building, so forth. Those clusters varies in importance for every country, right? Some countries have a big manufacturing base, some don't have that. So that is always a different sort of situation you start from. Then we had 2 scenarios, basically. The one scenario we called moderate scenarios. Starting from now to 2030, an adaptation rate of certain digital technologies like digital twin, smart building, traffic controls, e-health, in the same speed over the last 5 to 10 years that took place in Germany. Then we had an accelerated scenario where we thought, well, why don't the Germans can do things that other countries do? So you look at the adaptation rate in other countries of certain technologies, and you say, well, can you adopt that, knowing that there's always some structural differences in some cases? And if they are really true, then you adjust accordingly. But in general, taking sort of what's possible and what has been proven possible in other countries to Germany, so having accelerated scenario, hoping that the country can learn from other countries. And now a little bit context and also being humble on the study. Now we know that this is just saving potentials, right? This is one side of the coin. It is not realizing it. Realizing it's the truth, it's really the hard way. And we also know once you realize an efficiency gain, to keep it is very complex, right? Some people call it the rebound effect, but it's a classical economic phenomena. You have higher efficiency, you just consume or you produce more of it, on a regional scale or on a global scale, right? And Do we know how high the rebound effect is in 2030? Of course not, right? It can be very low, it can be very high, right? Ranges from 5 to 50%. There are some studies out there, but we didn't look at that. We are humble. We know there is an efficiency, a loss in the rebound effect, but does it all prevent it of not trying it? Of course not, you know. Now, and then we also realize that carbon is not equal to sustainability. There's more to sustainability than carbon, despite the fact that we right now truly focus on the topic. But there are other topics, the social dimension in Europe, but also the human rights aspect maybe in East Asia on global supply chains or sub-Saharan Africa. So all knowing that, we still wanted to make a contribution to the discussion, and Bitkom made that contribution of, is there a potential within, to achieve the German 2030 decarbonization targets faster, more economically better, maybe, than with digital technologies? And then to take on that discussion. Now, let me show you the results. On the next page, you see basically on the very left, this is the already latest reduction target for Germany. So this is the 50 and the 65% already. Now, this is 372 million tons. When we did this study, it was still the 55. Sort of our percentages have a little bit decreased because the ambition just got higher over the last couple of months. But still, 152 million ton gross. And then you take the 26, you see that in the red bar, which is the negative, the dark side, the footprint of digitization. You subcontract that, you down to 126 million tons. And in the moderate scenario, you're still with 85 million tons. And if you still believe that this is way too high calculated, this is, you just divide it by 2, and you're still talking about 60 to 40 million ton CO2 net saving potential, which I believe is all worth it, or is high enough to be worth it to follow up. And the saving potential, you see here, the enabling factor is 5 to 6 times for their own footprint in the German context. That does not mean that this automatically applies to other countries, because it always has a matter, what's the baseline of the energy mix where you start from, so to speak, and also the cluster, the industry clusters you take a look at, because there is different potential in different clusters, right? So the enabling factor can be different in some countries, but for the German context, it's 5 to 6, and the million tons, in my view, are quite substantial. Now, the question is, where do the 152 or 103 million tons of saving happen until 2030? Let's take a look at the 7 clusters. You see on the very left the total numbers I just mentioned. And then you have on the just right to it, manufacturing. This is the German industry base, including the process industry, right? Which we all talk about as difficult to decarbonize. Then you got the mobility one, the energy, the buildings, the workspace, agriculture, and of course, health, right? And one, as you see, it's more manufacturing and mobility and energy. So the big ones, buildings, of course, those are the 4 really heavy clusters where digitalization can really make a big difference. And you see here also on the bottom, the percentages within the sectors. Now let's take a look at an example within the manufacturing industry. This is the digital twin or the process optimization. We can go back one slide on page 8, please. You see the digital twin here can make a contribution to a decarbonization in 2 ways. One is, which is the lower sort of potential, that within the R&D, within the product development area, you need less materials because you all model it in your R&D department. But that's the tiny piece. The bigger one is when you start modeling CO2 emissions or other resources, not just on the production phase, but also on the use phase in the digital twin, you can optimize not just on cost, target costing, for example, but you can then also optimize on CO2. And that information data point doesn't exist on many digital twin processes right now, but it can be. added, and that information then can help to reduce the CO2 footprint. And this is even true for the process industry, where you normally would not think about digital twin, right? In the product industry, digital twin is, already existing for many, many years. In the process industry, the percentage of savings are smaller, yes, indeed, but they still exist. And that's important for Germany because, of course, the biggest carbon emission comes from steel, chemical, and all these heavy industries. But that is a very concrete point where we sort of lobby or argue the case that when companies do the product development process, they need to integrate carbon data and even more data. I work right now for one global consumer good company with more than 2,000 people in the R&D department, and we are helping them to integrate CO2 and human rights aspects into the product design process. And that is not easy, right? That is easily said, but it's pretty difficult actually, because it takes data. The data should be somehow correct and usually isn't. And it takes process changes, and people need to have new capabilities because not all know immediately what CO2, how to calculate CO2 in that means. That is one example. And if we dive deeper on the next page, we go, and the case study on the pharmaceutical company, which we can name here, I think it is Sanofi. They, introduced the digital twin in the production of a medication, and they could reduce 80% of the energy and CO2 equivalent, right? And even then the other ones as well, 91% of water. So that are heavy savings. Of course, if you've done it already, those numbers might be lower, but there is, in some cases, we found really a potential to decrease the energy consumption or the CO2 emissions in the production phase and also in the use phase of the product that is in the design phase. Now, let us then move on to the next topic, which is the dark side of digitalization, the footprint, so to speak. And that is often discussed, right, in the sense of broadband needs a lot of energy. The copper in the old cable needs even more energy, and all the data centers and all this, all true. But as I said earlier, the enabling factor is still 5 to 6 times. And only if it's 2 to 3, it's still much better, right? And if you take the 3 components of the digital footprint, the communication networks, the data centers, and the end user devices, you see here on those 2 scenarios, the biggest chunk comes from what we have in our hands, right? But we work with. The data centers are the middle ones, and then you have the communication networks, actually the lowest in that. And if we go broadband, it needs a lot less energy to some degree than all the existing stuff. So that is we looked at that, we took it into account, and the 18 to 26 million tons CO2 equivalent emissions that are coming from digital infrastructure, the footprint, are compensated with the potential. Now, that's good news. And having calculated that, now looking into the current discussion, what's going on right now, maybe on the next page, we'll see that the argument of digitalization, also in the context of Fit for 55, is even more needed than 2 years ago. And why is it the case? Now, you see here that in the German context, very similar to what's happening on the European Union, you have suddenly in summer higher ambition. You go 5 years earlier, and then by 2030 you go 65, right? So you cut even 5 years and you go higher and shorter, and that means you need more in a shorter period. And for that you need swift and actions across sectors. You need something that is scalable and speed of deployment, right? And not just here in Berlin, the planning cycle for a 500-meter extension of an already more or less built underground bahn takes 2 years just for the cost-benefit analysis, and it's planned 15 years for building 500 meters of underground extension. So with these infrastructure ideas that we all have, we're not going to make it in short time. That's very simple, unless we do something very different, which I'm not aware of. And here comes digitization. It might not be that a smart building might not be the end solution in the sense of a more insulated and totally refurbished building would be better. True, but that totally refurbished building takes 40 years, and the smart building takes 6 months, right? And that's where sometimes, I guess, practicality, speed comes into conflict with the ideal solution that we aim for, but that doesn't happen in 10 years on that scale. And that's where, in our view, digitization and decarbonization can really play an important role for the next 10 years. And on this lever aspect, on this enabling aspect, and also on actually helping infrastructures to be planned much faster and to be executed and used much faster, which is also enabling. Let's give you a little overview of how digitization can help to reduce the CO2 emissions in Germany, how we calculated it, and it's all downloadable, the entire study, including all the appendix for all the use cases. We have 7 clusters, 14 different use cases, so 2 digital technologies for every cluster. You can there are lots of information behind after it, and of course, Bitkom is very happy to answer all the questions and ourselves as well. It was a great pleasure to do the study, and thank you very much for giving us the opportunity to present today.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alexander, for not only sharing your insight, but also trying to summarize such a huge study. As you mentioned it before, it's all downloadable, so no worries if you want to check out any details, if you want to read about more case studies, feel free to do that. We'll also share the link among the participants afterwards, so no need for Googling. And yeah, for everyone, thanks for joining us and for spending the day with us today. And so I'd be really curious to see what our expert panel has to say, not only about the study, but also about various topics we just came across. You mentioned the Fit for 55 package. You mentioned these actions that are needed across sectors. And let's see what their experiences are when it comes to combining digitization and sustainability. And for that, we have 3 really great panelists, and it's a pleasure to welcome them today. It's also really interesting that these 3 panelists come from 3 different perspectives. So really we try to bridge kind of the gap between policy making and the corporate world, as that's the only way how we can achieve these ambitious goals. And yeah, we have a lot of topics to talk about, so let's quickly dive into it. And just one heads up before we'll start with our quick round of introductions. If you have any questions, if there's anything you would like to share, if there's anything you would like to discuss, feel free to use the chat, write your questions, also interact among the others. So if there is anything unclear or if you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to use our chat function. And yeah, having said that, it's a pleasure to give a quick introduction of who these people are, which you're currently seeing on your screens. We have Rasmus Andresen. He is a member of the European Parliament for the Greens, and he will be sharing, joining us from Brussels, the policy perspective, especially looking at the Fit for 55 package. We have Ramon. He's the global head and general manager 3D metals at HP, and he's focusing on 3D printing and really practical applications in the industry. And it's also a pleasure to have a female speaker on our panel, is Clémence Arto. She's the head of the European Government Affairs team at Autodesk. And as it's ladies first, I would like to start with you, Clémence. And during the short presentation from Alexander, we heard that there is still a lot to do, even if we look at the accelerated scenarios. So when you look at what Autodesk is doing, what drives Autodesk activities in the area? And can you maybe tell our audience a little bit more about your business case and what's your kind of company's motivation to implement these digital technologies?
Yes, thank you, Kim, and hi, everyone. Maybe a few words on Autodesk. I'm not sure that most of you or all of you know the name. Usually we're not known by our name, brand name, but by the products we create. Thing is, if you look around you, most of the buildings and products you see have been designed and made thanks to our software. So Autodesk He's a global leader of design and make software for engineers, architects, but also for manufacturers, also a little bit in the media. When I say a little bit, it's like the dragons of Game of Thrones, so that's something, but that's not what we're going to talk about today. And I'm very pleased to be here. First of all, I would like to congratulate Alexander Holst and his team. I was seriously impressed with the study. It's to the point, we often, shouldn't say that, but we often read sort of general studies that don't say much. And this one is very much database scientific. I love it. It's clear. It also doesn't shy away from talking about the footprint of digitalization, which I like, showing clearly that, yes, there is a footprint, but the benefits are bigger than the costs. So we should look at it very directly. That's what we do at Autodesk. And I'm going to talk today about two of the sectors that were mentioned as some of the most interesting in terms of digitalization to have an impact on climate, namely the building sector and the manufacturing sector. What we do at Autodesk is we provide the software that helps innovators in those sectors to better conceive the products, to optimize from the very early stages of design what they want the building to be like, what they want the product to be like, in terms of in terms of cost, in terms of time to produce, but also in terms of sustainability more and more. So we strongly believe that data and insights can help optimize, can help not only track, analyze the carbon footprint, but also ultimately reduce it, which is the goal. And to well, first of all, maybe quickly, we lead by example. We are also net zero, and we are not going to stop there. We have our impact report that is available online. Happy to talk more about it, but let's talk about what we do for our partners, customers. And maybe Jana, I've got a quick 30-second video that I want to show to explain a bit more what it's like. When we talk about design and including energy cost optimization. So when we use our software to design a building, video should start soon. What we do is we can take all the data available, meteorological and other, to, for instance, analyze the sun exposure of the building, daylight, how is it going to react to its environment. And on the left, this is one of our software. On the left, you can see the little widget that calculates the energy cost. Of course, it can be improved, but that's already in all of our software, allowing to not only focusing on the operation and maintenance, but also on the very early stages. Something, and Alexander mentioned it when we looked at the footprint of digitalization as well. All the sensors, it's a very good thing, and I'll come back to that. But our view, our conviction at Autodesk is that we can take it much early in the process of a building, at the very early stage of the design of a building and design of a product. And let me give you concrete examples. We have been working with an international consortium to provide a embodied carbon calculator to our clients. So embodied carbon is the carbon stemming from the material, the construction process. So not only the energy efficiency of the building while it operates, but the carbon footprint of the construction process itself. And by doing that, our clients can directly, on the tools that they use day after day, they can decide which material they should be using, what is the best place to take this material, what is the distance. So this helps. It's a first stage of optimization. And something in the manufacturing sector, so that's for the building sector. In terms of manufacturing, I really like that Alexander mentioned not only the project, but also the processes. It's not just about optimizing a product. We know we use AI, generative design to make this product better, but we also work in optimizing the process. There's a Porsche factory in Stuttgart that has used our software to optimize the way the machines are placed in the factory, so that there is less waste production, better cost optimization. And another example in Germany is the Mobility Goes Additive Association that was created by is the Deutsche Bahn, and it helps, it's 3D printing for spare parts. So instead of storing a lot of spare parts for the locomotive, for the trains, we can print them in real time, on demand. And this idea of real-time tracking and measuring and knowing what the needs are, I think is a big part of what the digitalization can bring to the climate objective, in addition to what Alexander said about the scaling. And for that, we clearly need to have everyone on board. And maybe a quick word on the Fit for 55 package. Clearly, it's great. We would hope that we could bring a little bit more of digital solutions in there, but maybe we can come back later to this. I don't want to take too much time. So sorry for the long intro, and thank you, Kim.
Thanks a lot, Clémence. It's always great to have kind of a broad perspective on that, and we will, of course, come back to the Fit for 55 package, especially as we try to bridge kind of the gap between not only your company's perspective, but also what's been set out in the policy framework. And as you mentioned, 3D printing, and also in our studies, 3D printing is often kind of one of the applications that's been mentioned for optimization potential, which is kind of that point that leads me to you, Ramon, coming from your perspective. So from your experience listening to what Alexander presented, what Clémence just said, to what extent do you think that climate protection as digital by design can really not only transform German companies, but also kind of the European industry we see?
Thank you, Kim. At the end, and I think that it has been said very well on the first two interventions, what digital tries to avoid is waste. The core of it is to avoid waste, and waste can happen from many different places. Waste can come from actually long and rigid supply chains that basically cannot respond quickly to demand changes, supply changes. Can come from basically a lot of energy that is used to transport the goods from the place they are manufactured to where they are sold, or could come, and we've been talking about design, from basically what is your idea, what is your intent on design? Do you design for cost, but do you have sustainability on your design parameters or not? And what digitization is doing, what we call Industry 4.0, enabled by different technologies, Industrial Internet of Things, 3D printing, and others, is enable this end-to-end digitization of the product development, the manufacturing processes, which enables a change on paradigm, a potential change of paradigm on supply chains. If you think a little bit, what is the current paradigm on supply chain is that basically to produce any product, you need basically an infrastructure, a heavy infrastructure that usually is not easy automatable. So basically you put this infrastructure in places, in countries with low wages. To amortize this infrastructure, you basically go to volume production, and basically you do generic products that you transport to the other side of the world to consume. What digitization and at the core 3D printing is enabling is a totally change of paradigm, moving from this central production to distributed production. From this mass production, because you don't have any asset to amortize, then you can go to on-demand printing. And from generic products to personalized products. So at the end, what we're trying to do is basically you produce only what you need, where you need it, and in the moment that you need it. And if you combine this with different business models, like for instance, product as a service, where basically you use the product only when you need it and you don't need to acquire it. Basically, you use it only when you need it. This is when big transformation can happen. So it's a addition of different elements that can digitize the supply chain, but the big transformation on the way to think on different industries need to happen to yield the results.
Thanks a lot. Now, coming to you, Rasmus, as kind of looking from the policy perspective. So in this study, we really try to show that digital technologies are not just nice to have, but really these are kind of the core things we need to develop in the future to reach our ambitious goals. So from your perspective, as someone sitting in the parliament, what role should digital technologies play in order to reach our ambitious climate goals for not only Germany, but Europe?
Yes, first of all, let me thank you for organizing this event and also for coming up with a study which I think really shows some good examples for how to deal also with the fight against global warming with the help of digitalization. First of all, I would like to mention that and you pointed that also out, Alexander, very well, that we of course also need to have an honest talk about also some developments we can see also, for example, when it comes to rebound effects, when it comes about the current situation, when it comes especially also on the electricity usage of bigger companies, both in the industry, but also in looking on the big tech companies. And we also need to look on questions like, for example, e-waste, where we already can see that 12 million tons of e-waste actually are produced this year. And so this is something we need to have we need to take into account. And then, of course, it's true, if you find the right balance in politics, but also in the industry, by coming up with innovative solutions and a regulatory framework, and you find a combination of those two elements, then I think there is a lot possible, and I think we need to work on this together. And my feeling is that in Brussels, people, the institutions are waking up, but we may need some more speed, and we need to see some more action in some of the elements you already were talking about. And I just would like to mention in the Fit for 55 package some elements where you can see, like for example on the energy efficiency directive, where you can see some obligations for accounting of, for example, electricity usage, or also related to data center, the energy consumption of data center, some criteria also to take also energy consumption into account, for example, in public procurement. And this, I think, is the way forward. But still, there are a lot of elements, other elements, I think we also in politics need to address, like, for example, to come up also with some binding reduction targets, or to implement things like the right to repair, or also the question of the common charger regulation, which I guess you are aware of, that this had been discussed in the past in Brussels, but where we actually are missing concrete action from the side of the Commission, because I think this would also give the possibility for industry in general to have like a common framework everybody can follow, because as we can see it right now, there are some first movers and some good examples also here in the panel, but on the other side we also can see that the incentives maybe is not big enough for some of the companies, and this is what I think will change with some of the legislation we are dealing with in the European Parliament right now. Yeah, but I'm looking forward to the discussion, and hopefully, I guess we will find also some common solutions. There is a lot to do, and I think, as also some of you already mentioned, that we need to do it together, right? We need a policy framework, we need the policy part in it, but we also need to have industry leading the way with innovation and with good examples.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Rasmus, for being so open. You said we need an honest talk, not only about rebound effects, but I guess more generally about what's kind of the vision and what are the digital aspects of the Fit for 55 package, and what can we all kind of learn from it, and how can we all contribute it. So maybe from your experience, what in your experience is kind of the biggest obstacle when we look at these Fit for 55 negotiations? So what's kind of the biggest hurdle when we want to talk about a more effective use of these digital technologies that are out there, with what we can see having Clémence and Ramon here on our panel?
Well, from my perspective, we are the Commission is not addressing digitalization enough in the Fit for 55 package. I mentioned some elements where the Commission started to put it on the agenda or in the regulation, but from my perspective, it's very in the beginning of what is possible. And what I would like to see is, for example, also when it comes, for example, to renovation, or also the agricultural part, where you can see a lot of money flowing, European taxpayers' money flowing to the agricultural sector. I would like to see a much more I don't know, funding possibilities also, for example, to give some incentives to really lead the way when it comes, for example, to the agricultural part, where we know, and it's obvious that if digitalization would be used, or digital technologies would be used much more related to the agricultural sector, that we would reduce, for example, pesticides and other things. But still, it's at the early beginning of what would be possible, and there are, of course, also some big differences from country to country. But there, I would see, for example, the Commission communicating much stronger that if you want to have some public funding, for example, in the agricultural programs, then you need to go ahead with the digitalization, because it's a smart way in reducing some of the pesticides or CO2 emissions. It won't be the only thing we need to do on this issue. It's a very complicated issue, but it can help. And this is what I think not everybody in Brussels is doing. There are good people, for example, working in the Commission in the different DGs, but it's not like a crossover issue where, for example, DG Agri, the one sitting with the funds, are dealing or thinking in the same direction as the colleagues working on digitalization in the cabinet of Margrethe Vestager or Thierry Breton, for example.
Yeah, Clémence, I saw you were nodding and smiling here and there, and you also earlier in your statement said that there can be done more, and there needs to be done more. So maybe from your perspective, looking at the Fit for 55 package, what's kind of missing, or what's your expectation for further developments here?
Yeah, I mean, the last sentence of Rasmus made me think there's a lot of fragmentation today. And what we need is a coherent and single approach. Let me give you an example. There's sort of a gap between the other instruments like the renovation wave strategy, the industrial strategy that clearly points out digitalization and digital solutions as the way to go, and the Fit for 55 package, which is a real piece of legislation. But if we talk about the Energy Efficiency Directive, I looked at it, there is only one mention of digital tools, only one. And that just makes me think that today, we obviously support the package, but we would love to see a bit more of a link, a clear ambition that says we need those digital solutions if we want to achieve the climate goals. And the study presented by Alexander shows it pretty well. We need ambitious measures and direction. And let's talk about building renovation. Energy Efficiency Directive says 3% of public buildings should be renovated. That's great. But what we know from the past is that there's different types of renovation. If we do a quick fix on those buildings, we'll tick the box renovation, but we will be having the same discussion in 10, 20, 30 years. That's where digital solutions, because of the scale, because of the data insight that they can provide, can help not only renovate the building stocks just now, but prepare for the future. And that's what that's why we believe that there could be a better link. Renovation Wave states clearly we need BIM, building information modeling tools, the design tools that allow us to have a 3D modeling of a building and to manage it. And now it's gone from, I mean, I didn't see it in other concrete instruments, and we know, and that's been said, we know we need it's a political and a policy push. I don't think it will come from it won't come automatically. We as an industry company, we have a strong responsibility. We have a role to play. We partner with our clients, but I think we need to also have the same ambitions coming from the European Commission in terms of digitalization.
Yeah, thanks a lot. You mentioned these kind of concrete instruments that are needed or that are already there and being developed. So Ramon, maybe I guess for our audience, it would be really interesting to see what actually kind of is the potential of 3D technologies. As I guess not all of us are kind of experts or that much in detail. So could you maybe elaborate a bit on especially the environmental potential of this technology?
Yeah. There's different ways. Sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, Ramon. I thought the question was for me. Apologies.
Okay, no problem, Clémence. So there's different ways that actually you can take advantage of 3D to cut emission and basically to go forward on this to achieve all these sustainable goals. And let me start with design. I don't know how many engineers or designers are in the audience, but if basically you go to the engineering school, the first thing that they will teach you is that every manufacturing method has its own constraints in terms of geometry. There is certain things that you can do in certain manufacturing technologies, and there is other shapes that you cannot do. 3D printing actually is the only one that doesn't have any geometrical constraint, which means that actually you have total freedom to do any shape that you have, which is great for innovators, for designers. But if you look at sustainability, this has a major advantage. First is basically you can do parts, you can design parts using Autodesk software, using any other software that actually use less material, which is intrinsically good from a point of view of all the supply chain, all the impact on sustainability of the material. But second is that you can do designs that are lighter, and lighter is good intrinsically because the parts that are lighter in a car gives you more autonomy, less fuel. Parts that are lighter in a plane, the same. But also parts that are lighter are cheaper to transform from where they're manufactured to where they're controlled. So design freedom is actually a major advantage of 3D printing. And we have many examples internally. Actually, we're using 3D printing in our own 3D printers, reducing 80, 90, 95% of carbon footprint from the previous manufacturing technique, or externally where we have customers in, for instance, on the podiatric application that they were before milling their insole, and now basically, and this milling method were basically wasting 90% of the material. Now basically they're using the material they need. That's one part. Second part is basically the reduction of the emissions because of distribution. And I was explaining this a little bit before. The thing here, the big idea is not to build products and send them to anywhere of the world. The idea here, when you have a design, you transmit a digital file. And what you do is basically you produce it where you need it. And basically all these emissions of distribution, today, a big majority of the fuel consumed today is to transport goods from where produced to where they're controlled. And the last one is that 3D printing, because of the on-demand behavior, is being able to do a supply-demand matching. And this is very important because there are a lot of industries that, because of the rigidity of the supply chain, they actually scrap up to 30% of what they produce. Can you imagine? The publishing industry scraps 30% of the books they produce. There's different industries that actually this scrap can be to 30-40% because you produce and you don't know what you are going to sell. If you basically manufacture where you need the demand at the moment that you need, you can do this one-to-one supply-demand matching. And what is even better, you can move to virtual inventory, which is basically the heaven. No? It's basically you sell before you produce, and therefore there is no scrap, there is no waste. Even, and I think Clémence was talking about this, enabling replacement parts that were basically out of stock, that will enable basically products to be able to function more and more years. So there's different aspects where 3D printing can contribute, from design, supply chain, supply demand matching, which basically makes a big impact on to achieve our sustainable goals.
I'm also looking at you as you were on your way to also answer the question. Is there anything you would like to add from your perspective?
No, it's exactly what I was going to say. So, you know, Ramon said it much better than I would have, and thank you, apologies. I want to leave some time for Alexander or the others to add some comments.
Great, I see Alexander unmuted himself.
Yes, I think, I mean, I always wonder for the last 5 years, and Rasmus, you mentioned it actually a little bit, like, why hasn't it been taken up already, you know? And I guess I've got 3 answers to it. One is, we as human beings tend to overvalue risk than opportunities. That's a natural thing in all, you know, we've done this for the last 100,000 years. That's the way we survive. So here again, we come with potential opportunities, but in the media, you only talk about the energy footprint of something, right? So that's a very natural human being, and most likely would never change. But that's one reason, right? So we overvalue the risk. The second is that governments are not taking the lead in this, whether being, as you said, Rasmus, I like that, you know, the linking with the agricultural piece, right? Linking incentives with certain actions, or having the most modern buildings, you know, on certain topics. It's the opposite, right? You go into a government building, into a school building. I've got 5 kids. You go into the school buildings, it's not the most modern building on this planet, right? Or you go to the public Bürgerbüro, you think you are in 1950, you know? So that's, the government doesn't take the lead role in all levels, from procurement, and the third one is the individual behavior also in corporates. I tried to sell smart building stuff in the 2010th from Smart City Amsterdam and so forth, and I found it really amazing. This like, the business case was, you know, 12 months, very amortization rate 12 months. It wasn't much investment. It was a smart building solution. It was a contractual kind of nightmare a little bit, but it was a real thing, and real savings, energy-wise, money-wise. But companies felt, well, it's not the best solution. The best solution would have been, like I said, to really redo the building, you know, have a new building. It only is 10% decrease. We should go for 40%. So instead of taking what's in your hand, you're looking at one on your rooftop and you're discussing, because maybe the 10% doesn't really matter that much, right? The value isn't high enough. The 10% savings in a C category product or a C category cost item, you know, isn't on your number 1 list, right? And that's sort of where I felt interesting. And then again, last point, individual behavior. I went to in Berlin I picked up my German passport, you know, this little plastic passport thing, and then, you know, I got it, and then I saw this leaflet of, oh, you can have a digital passport too, and I said to the guy in the Bürgerbüro, I said, okay, what does it take? You know, can I have this digital thing too? Yeah, you can have this, but it's not secure. You know, you shouldn't wonder about, you might wonder about the data. So the government official has no trust in his own product, telling me as citizen that is not secure. I mean, how on earth shall we do diffusion of new innovation, you know? Unbelievable. So it's our natural risk awareness. It's the fact that the government does not lead, and then it's our individual behavior where we maybe just don't care. It's not enough, and for that we all need to tackle all three things in my view.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Alexander. I guess there are some stories people think that are quite familiar, especially when it comes to digital technologies in kind of what the Bürgerbüro does, or what kind of offerings we have from the state. So maybe Rasmus, as we see, we only have 5 minutes left, which is crazy. One last question is we're listening to Ramon and Clémence, and also to what Alexander says. If we want to kind of work more together between industry and the policy side, and if Europe is kind of revising its legislative framework, what do you think? What kind of role should the digital industry play in order to be faster, to be better, and to be kind of more modern?
Well, I mean, push for it and push policymakers also in this direction, and also come up with your ideas, like you're doing in an event like today. I mean, on the point Alexander made, I think there is still a huge difference among the different member states. We can see this development, those developments in Germany, for example, but also in other countries. In other parts of Europe, it's quite different. So I'm half Danish, half German, so I know both sides. In Denmark, it's a lot different than, for example, in Germany, but still we need to address it, and we need also to implement it in the Brussels or in the EU institutions in a way that the thinking, the mindset is changing. And I think this is a really important point, besides of the regulation and besides of programs and so on. But we need to change the mindset, and this is also, of course, something very complicated, because you all know how complicated it is to get people to change, maybe not their behavior, or I don't know, also their behavior, but also the way like they are looking on the world, right? And this is something I would say, we need the digital industry to push for in also related to politics. Don't be frustrated, but but do your part, that things will change.
Thanks a lot, Ramon, Clémence. Rasmus just talked about shifting mindsets. So if this is your opportunity to kind of speak to the EU bubble, what's your wish for future lawmakers when we look at new EU policies from really the corporate practical application side of digital technologies and sustainability? Maybe, Ramon, you want to go first?
Sure. I think that we all share this sense of urgency on this global threat. And I think that we've been all talking about this. We need this close relationship between policymaker and industry. So when we put goals, we have this balance of being the maximum that we can reach, but they're achievable. And this is a very fine balance. We can have very, very, very aggressive goals and that are not achievable, and basically you lose momentum. Or basically you have very easy goals and it will not get to the maximum. So this solution, it needs to be through this dialogue between industry and basically policy makers. The second thing I think is very important is that not only let's put goals, but actually we need to track and report. So it's great to say that we're doing to do something by 2030, but if we don't put intermediate goals that we can track and we can report, and we can allow actually a learning if we are not meeting and basically, this is very important. Have transparency, have intermediate goals. And the other big ask from our side is really to have a harmonized legislation and to avoid this national fragmentation that sometimes happen, which is a mess for companies. So I think that if we do all of this, we get help also from policymakers, not only to give visibility to the goals, but basically ways to achieve them. So there is awareness, there is things on solutions on basically how to encourage the adoption of these new technologies that actually will help the end goal, I think that will be a great collaboration, and I think we have a chance actually to make it happen.
Clémence, how about you? What's your wish to the EU bubble?
Yeah, and I'm a big fan of policy, you know, that's why I'm in government affairs. So I would say there's something on the table called the Sustainable Built Environment Strategy. I don't know where it is now, but I would love for it to be a global collective exercise between researcher and corporation and the Commission. I think we have a great opportunity with this strategy to centralize and to harmonize the legislation to include more digital solution. And in the word that are often here in Autodesk is give us the why and the what, and we'll provide the how. So that's what I wish.
Thanks a lot. And looking at the time, it's 4 p.m. So that was on point. I tried to write down the key points you mentioned. So I guess my 3 takeaways from today's discussion are: first of all, let's work together. I guess this panel was a great example of how we can bridge the gap between policy and like applications in the industry. The second one is be honest about not only learnings and goals, but also about differences, especially if we look at EU legislation, that we have different member states and we have different kind of settings and contexts. And I guess the third point is to speed up, because we have our goals and we have the sense of urgency, and we need to act now if we want to reach our ambitious climate goals, not only for us, but also for future generations to come. So again, thank you very much for being part of this panel. Thanks to our audience for joining us today. And if you have any follow-up questions, feel free, I would say, to contact our speakers again, and we will share the information about the Bitcom study that Alexander presented from Accenture's side afterwards. So thank you very much, and goodbye from my side.
Goodbye. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim.